In this lesson, we'll continue a review of Writing Test 7, Section 2. We're now on the third of 4 passages, The Evolution of Slow Food. In 1986, McDonald's caused a stir in Italy when it opened a restaurant next to Rome's historic Spanish Steps. Young on-the-go eaters were thrilled, specifically those who prize regional foods and Italy's convivial culture built on cooking and long meals, feared that the restaurant signaled the death of a way of life. And so McDonald's opened this restaurant in this historic section of Rome. We have this opening clause, young on-the-go eaters were thrilled, and a semicolon. So now we have a separate clause, specifically those who prize regional foods built on cooking and long meals. They feared that the restaurant signaled a death of a way of life. This is not giving more information about the young on-the-go eaters. This is contrasting. The young on-the-go eaters were really happy, but the people who favored tradition and these slow cooked meals, they feared that it signaled a death of a way of life. So we certainly don't want specifically, or for example, or in fact, we want contrast. And the answer is however. To counter the rise of fast food and fast life, a cohort of chefs, journalists, and sociologists spearheaded a slow food movement, declaring loyalty to unhurried enjoyment. And so here, before the comma, this is describing a subject, but we don't have the subject. This is called a participial phrase. And whenever you see these, some clause that's describing a subject, to counter the rise of fast food and fast life, you need a comma. And right after the comma, you need the subject that is being described. So who's countering the rise of fast food? Well, it's a group of chefs, journalists, and sociologists. This looks totally fine with the comma. It's not a semicolon that would create a fragment. Remember, that's 2 independent clauses. It's not a colon. It's certainly not a period. And so the answer here is no change for this one. And then 25, we have a question at the end of this paragraph that we just read. So let's take a look at 25. So we just finished reading this group of chefs, journalists, and sociologists. They spearheaded a slow food movement, declaring loyalty to unhurried enjoyment. At this point right here, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. The group's philosophy was connected to the tale of the hare and the tortoise, in which the tortoise wins the race. So you have to ask yourself, first of all, is this relevant? Now, even though it talks about speed, right, this philosophy of the hare and the tortoise, it really doesn't tie it back at all. It's sort of incomplete, and it's not really connected, right? And so you have to ask yourself, is it relevant at this point? And I would say no, because if it had one more sentence, maybe if it tied it back, but it's just one sentence at the end, and that's the end of the paragraph. It really doesn't fit there. So you're going to have 2 guesses and 2 no's. So let's take a look at the 2 no's, C and D. Does it blur the paragraph's focus by introducing a new idea that's not clearly explained? This looks good, right? It just gives this philosophy and then ends the paragraph. Or does it distract from the paragraph's emphasis on slow food movements, origins, and beliefs? It doesn't distract. I mean, it is about speed, and it sort of relates, but not enough where it really belongs and it doesn't connect back. And so the answer is C. All right, and then we've got a question. Let's read this paragraph, and then we'll take a look at 26. From its beginning, the movement had opposed the standardization of taste that fast food chains promote. For example, McDonald's hamburger made in Boston tastes more or less the same as one made in Beijing. This consistency is made possible by industrial mass production. All right, so this is a tense issue. Had opposed. Had, if you see a had, and then you see opposed, this is called the past perfect. And that means that this movement, it happened and it's over. And you have to ask yourself, they set this group up, and I know it started back in 86, but is there evidence that it's ended? Or do you need some indication that it's still going on? And if you look at the choices, had opposed, you've got just opposes, will oppose, and has opposed. Look for clues in other parts of the sentence. Is it still going on? Well, we've got this consistency is made, right? Is made. And so that indicates that it's still going on. We can't have the past perfect because it's still going on. You want the has. And this is called the present perfect. And again, you might be able to listen to it and find the answer as well, but I'm just giving you a little bit of grammar. It's still going on. It's made possible, so it has opposed. It happened in the past, but it's still continuing today. All right, I'll just read the rest of this, even though there's no question. Remember, always read the whole passage. You won't have trouble with time, I think, and also there might be a question about the main theme. And so even though there's no question here, there might be information that's relevant later. Slow food supporters, by contrast, back methods of growing and preparing food based on regional culinary traditions. When produced using traditional methods, goat cheeses made in France taste different from goat cheese made in Vermont. A goat ingest the vegetation particular to the meadow on which it grazes, which, along with other environmental factors, such as altitude and weather, shapes the cheese's taste and texture. So here, 27, which, along with other environmental factors, and then we've got the factors such as altitude and weather. This is a non-essential clause. We've seen these all the time on the test. They have to be bound by commas or dashes or parentheses, but you can't just have it without punctuation. And you could just even cross it out and it would still make sense, right? You need 2 commas there. And so the answer is B. And if you just cross it out, along with other factors, shapes the cheese's taste and texture. Totally works. And I'll just do one more and we'll stop this video. If all foods were produced under the industrial model, we would have meals that are not very flavorful. Let's take a look at the question. Which choice best effectively supports the point of the paragraph? Well, this paragraph talked about the diversity of meals depending on where the cheese came from. Is this about if all foods were produced under this model, we would have foods that, no, because there's different flavors. It really talks about in the different meadows and the vegetation that there's diversity of taste, right? It's not that there isn't taste, it's just that there's a variety of taste based on where the animal is from. It's not standardized based on the McDonald's model. And so if you look at the choices, the central point, instead of we would have meals that are not very flavorful, consumers would lose this diversity in evidence-based writing. All right, D is the answer there.